All right, welcome. Good morning. My name is Travis, and welcome to Therapy for Dads. And I'm welcoming on today's show, first time ever, a group interview with Hector and Markay, and they are from their own podcast called HerBestDadEver. How you guys doing this morning?
Yes.
Good.
Doing good.
Yes,
Doing
I'm glad
good.
to be here.
Glad to have you guys on.
Glad to be here too.
Yeah. Good morning. It's 5:30 a.m.
It is.
Yeah.
It's early. You see it in my eyes, hear it in my voice.
Yeah.
And glad to be here though.
Yeah. I'm glad to have you guys on. It's Hector and I have been talking over the past few months and meaning to do this, and we finally carved out some time to get this done and to have a conversation. So I'm really excited, and and the work that you guys are doing on your podcast, and for those who don't know, Her Best Dad Ever is a girl dad podcast. Their heart is to talk about what it's like being girl dads and to learn from other girl dads and get wisdom and to pass that on. So they have a great show. So check them out. If you want another podcast to listen to for fathers specifically and specifically for girl dads. So they're doing some great stuff over there. I love your guys' podcast. I don't have a girl, and I listen because
it's great.
It's a lot of wisdom that you guys get. A lot of guys, great conversations, and so I take it and like, this is awesome. I mean,
yeah, man, we're really excited about it and the stuff that we're learning.
Yeah, it's great. It really is. And so, and those who have been listening, it's funny. I think this is one of my first video interviews of someone who is on the West Coast who has a similar time zone as me. Because often I'm recording people on the East Coast or in the UK or somewhere else where it's a significant time difference. So we're all sharing in the early morning.
Yes.
Which feels good.
Yeah, man.
So Hector, Markay, whoever wants to jump in first, how about you go ahead and start by introducing yourself? Tell us a little about, dad, how many kids, what you do.
Yeah. So my name's Hector Jimenez. I have 4 girls, twin baby girls who are 5. I said babies; they're kids now. But twin girls who are 5. I have a 3-year-old. I have a 1-year-old, Sarai Eden, Joelle, and Glory. I've been married for 10 years. And we live in Southern California. I work as a professor at a private university in Riverside in music. So aside from that, I'm a songwriter, an artist, and just love all things music.
Okay. You sound great, man.
Yeah, it does. I know. That's a
Thanks, man.
I mean, that was a great elevator speech.
Man, that was. I'm like, man, the bar is high,
Yeah, I know. It's like, well, I'm not a professor.
Right. Like, all right, guys. So my name is Markay Fairley. I have 2 kids, a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, Gabrielle and Savannah. I've been married. It'll be 9 years next month. Wow, 9 years. I'm a musician, producer. I travel and play with different artists, and yeah, that sums up Markay.
Nice.
It was great, Markay. It was just as powerful as Hector's.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. It was
We have our elevator speeches down.
Right, we do.
And who, out of curiosity, who is the artist you're going on tour with next there, Markay?
So I been playing with a hip hop artist, hip hop legend in the name of Nas, for the last 10 to 12 years. Been playing with him. So for the first 6 or 7 years, it was more like we do tours 2 to 3 months out of the year. But as I got married, started having kids, I slowed it down a lot, just because I didn't come up with a father in the home, and I didn't want to be that type of father to my kids. So slowed that down a little bit, and now we do like spot dates, so dates here and there, but not like just crazy tours throughout the year. So
okay,
but yeah, man.
Good.
2 things right there. One, so when you play with Nas, what do you do? Are you one of the dancers, or do you sing?
I'm definitely one of the dancers. You know? That's awesome. No, I'm his piano player. So
awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And for those geeks out there, what kind of keys do you play? What's your key?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. Most people don't care about that. So yeah, I play Nords. I'm a huge Nord fan. I'm also a huge Hammond organ B3 fan,
Yeah.
Fender Rhodes.
Yep.
So that's pretty much my speed right there.
Well, yeah, those are all. I mean, those. If you're gonna play keys, I mean, those are all the ones you want to play. So, yeah, for all you any musicians listening, like, yeah, that's yep. If you don't know about keys, like those are what you play. And they're great instruments, man.
Yeah,
You can do a lot with them. And I don't want to leave Hector out. So, Hector, what's your main instrument? Because I know you do music.
Yeah, no, I sing, I play keys, play a little bit of guitar, and songwrite.
It's good to have fellow musicians on, and I call myself. For those listening, I'm putting quotes in this, big fat quotes, but I'm also a musician. So I don't know if I'd stand up against Markay, but no, I also love music, and it's a big part of my life, and whether listening or playing, and I'm sure you guys can relate to that. It's a good outlet for
awesome,
stress, mental health, and just for fun. I love it.
Awesome.
Right, music is a big part of. It's a powerful thing, right?
It's awesome. I noticed you just said Markay, though. You didn't say me.
Hector.
Hey, so you got the professor tag, okay? So let me have this one.
Right, yeah. Just got to see who you got the professor tag, professor. Do you have the cool, do you have a doctorate too? Do you have the cool garb and everything in the hat?
No, I don't have the doctorate.
Okay.
Trying to avoid that one. I've learned just about me. Like I'm not technically. I don't feel like an academic. I'm more of a practitioner. I'm in education.
Academia.
I'm in academia because I love. I just love mentoring students. I love working with them.
That's awesome. I'm sure your students feel that. So, okay, so let's jump in then to kind of the meat of the show. Whoever wants to start, really, Markay or Hector. So I would love to know, within your dad journey or even now, can you share a difficulty that you've gone through as a father, as a man? Could you go ahead and share with us about that?
Yeah, I'll start, Hector.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I alluded to it a little earlier when talking about my touring stuff. A difficulty that I had to navigate being a dad was fatherlessness. Me not having a foundation of what a father looks like in a home. And so entering into fatherhood, I didn't know how that will spring up again. Like I've been through therapy and all the things to wrestle with that, and got to a place of thinking I was okay, which I was. But then once you start having kids, it kind of sprung up again in a new way, and so that was just one difficult thing that I had to navigate.
Yeah.
And through mentors and people coming in my life, community, to really speak into me and me to learn from, was really helpful for me. But I just remember having so much anxiety of wow, my father wasn't there. So I don't know what a healthy father looks like in a home. So how therefore I'm going to be this father to these kids, without having that background. So it was really difficult, but I'm all about, breaking generational curses, changing the narrative, and just trying to be the best father I can be, even without that.
Wow. Yeah. And you mentioned, if you don't mind my asking, you said it did some therapy, you did some work. So it sounds like you had this awareness of needing to work on that. So when you saw a therapist, what were you kind of seeing them for? Obviously not sharing everything, but within that fatherless, was it kind of dealing with the emotions behind it, the fear? Was it about the hurt, the loss, or a combination of that?
Yeah, pretty much everything that you just articulated. The fear, the emotional side of things. Me feeling that I couldn't be emotionally present, just because I wasn't validated from that side of things. So therefore, fear rose up. And so so a lot of those things that you just articulated.
You did some therapy for that, about that fear, that anxiety, about not having a model of a father in the home.
Right.
And you shared that you thought you were okay. Like, hey, you work through it essentially with therapy. And
Yeah.
then it came back after having your kids. It was like it returned. You mentioned reaching out to mentors and getting some help. So I'm wondering, what was it that came back? Was it just, I have a kid now and now it's feeling differently? Or what was it?
It's funny. I did a post about this like a while back. It was just little moments, and I'm gonna give your listeners a clear picture. It wasn't when the baby came out that all of these things I start to wrestle with those things. It was more so throughout my father journey. As my kids grew, I start to see little things that they do that I did, longing for my father. I'm pushing my daughter on a swing at a park, and she's asking a simple question like, "Daddy, where's Grandpa?" And it just took me back to 5-year-old Markay asking, "Wow, where's my dad?" So little moments like that, where it really kind of, I think moments like that really did something to me, where I was like, "Oh wow, I still, it's still there, and it's resurfacing in a different type of way, which I didn't foresee to come." So yeah.
And then that's when you decided, hey, I need to reach out to a mentor. And then you did. You reached out and said, hey, okay, good. It sounds like that was helpful to have someone to reach out to.
Oh, it definitely was.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I love about me and Hector's podcast, the idea of like not doing this alone and feeling the pressure, because I feel like us dads, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. So the fact that me and Hector can do this anytime I'm, having a day, I can just reach out to this guy, and he's just a huge source of encouragement and reminding me who I am, and man. So
wow.
It's been great. Yeah, I mean, through the podcast, Her Best Dad Ever, we've essentially, we've acquired a lot of mentors. Through this, even though it's just been 1 or 2 conversations, we can go back and listen to them, and we've really are learning a lot. And what you're saying about mentorship, Travis, is key. It's important.
You just said something, Markay, too, that you tell me if this fits. You said you're pushing your daughter on the swing, right? And she asked the question, where's Grandpa? And it like took you back, right? To 5-year-old Markay and asking, where's Dad? And to me, it sounds an awful lot like that. It's grief. It's grief and loss, which it's that we can be re-triggered, because grief and loss is a process. We like to think that grief and loss is like this nice clean cut. I go through it and then it's done. I'm good. And now I'm just at acceptance and it's perfect from here on out. I never feel it again. But it sounds like it's like that it hits you in that that emotional bone, or what you want to call it. Like, oh, wow, yeah, I'm feeling that again. And I'm having to, in a way, readdress that loss, or kind of process that again now with my daughter.
Right.
And I'm feeling the emotions and feeling what it was like to, maybe be in a similar situation and what that was like. Is that kind of what it's like? Is that kind of how you would describe it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because, for us fathers, like, we want to be the protector, like, so, and I pride myself to be this protector for my daughters. And just, there's a little fear there that I saw, like, wow, I can't protect her from everything. There's going to be things that she's going to be exposed to. And we're gonna have to navigate it together, So man.
Well, and I do love what you said too, that you reached out to mentors. You reached out, and you said, "Hey, let's talk and clear my head." And even so, it sounds like the show's a bit about that too, of reminding you, Hector, I think you said it, reminding us of who we are. And who does it remind you of who you are, Markay? What does it help you remind you of? Like, who is Markay, I guess, at the core?
You get right to it, man.
I know. I was about to say, man, I want my turn. I want my therapy here.
You're coming up next, man. Don't worry.
I think ultimately, man, it just reminds me that I am not my dad's mistakes, and just because he decided to take that path doesn't mean that I have to. I can change the narrative and break the generational curse within my family, and it doesn't have to continue.
Dang, that's good, Markay.
Man.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm not my dad's mistakes.
That hit me. I'm not my dad's mistakes. I mean, gosh, what a powerful thing to know the truth and to use that as a weapon when you start to, I guess, when the fear creeps back in. It's like, no, I'm not my dad's mistakes, right? That's, geez, wow.
There's your episode title, Travis.
Yeah, I'm not my dad's mistakes. Shoot, man, we can tell. yeah, I think it's a lot. I feel like that would be for a lot of men and women, but specifically speaking to men, I think that would be something that would resonate with a lot of men,
Yeah.
a lot of men that maybe they haven't been able to articulate it that way. But geez, I
Wow.
mean, even I feel that a little bit of that about that one, in my story, that there was times that I was afraid too, a little bit, repeating my dad's mistakes. And there was a whole season too where I was like, gosh, I'm afraid because I don't want to end up like what he did.
Right.
And decisions he made and the people he hurt. And so I could relate to that feeling of like, oh yeah, I know that feeling. I get that one. So Hector, your turn. So can you share a bit about maybe a difficulty you went through as a father, as a man? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I feel like the difficulty was there before, was there early on in their childhood, and it's still something I work through and struggle with, and that's the topic of workaholism, if that's a word. The whole topic of being a workaholic. Both my dad and my mom were very, very hard workers. They never stopped. My dad worked full time outside the home. My mom worked at home. And I think I always witnessed, both my parents just going, working.
Yeah.
On top of that, I received validation and affirmation for my performance. As I've been through therapy myself and look back at my childhood, it was always achieving and doing that got recognition. Yeah, there were other things, but I remember specifically as a kid, oh man, if I achieve, if I perform, that's what gets the accolade, that's what gets the affirmation. So
and was it like, if I achieve, then I'm enough?
Yes, I'm enough for sure. Yep. And so, springing, propelling me into high school, into college. I remember in college, before I even was married or had kids, I was, as a musician, I was gigging, 5, 6, sometimes 7 nights a week. And just for what? Just to keep going, looking back, I think, man, I wish I had more time just not doing anything, just hanging with my friends or, whatever. Early in my marriage, before we start having kids, working in ministry at a church, just going really hard, 3, sometimes 4 rehearsals, throughout the week, so 3, 4 nights I'm away, working really hard during the weekend. We have an opportunity to, minister to more people. So, let's start a Saturday night, open mic night, and just going. Looking back now, seeing that it was for affirmation, it was for validation. And, now, then going into actually having kids, I feel like my wife and I went through a lot and did a lot of work before we had kids. So it took the edge off a little bit, when we actually had the kids, but still very much being there, of doing the hard work in myself of, okay, why am I okay, spending so many hours at work when, my kids are at home, if I am at home, why is it so hard for me to be present and rest and always feel like I'm needing to check something off of my to-do list? I feel like I'm in a much better place now. I think you probably have to ask my wife to get the complete honest answer, but things like this, I've been in therapy for the last 3 years, and especially our podcast. Even in the podcast, that's a big thing that keeps coming up, is being present. I feel like I'm growing in that and getting better. I think, like a lot of people, the pandemic kind of forced some really hard reckonings with yourself, with myself, and was able to see the importance of being present, being home as well.
Wow.
Gosh, man. Yeah, just that transition from learning that, like, here's how I get my accolades as a young child, is through performance, right? Not that, I guarantee you, your parents, it probably wasn't intentional, but it doesn't matter what they intended, right? It's how we picked up on it as children, and that's a classic one I've heard. And I can relate to that, through performance being enough. I think a lot of men in general, and I'm generalizing for men, but I think it's often men find that accolade through achievement, through performance.
Yes.
And if I perform, if I achieve, then I have value, then I'm enough.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with that is, and at least this was my story, what I used to believe, or what I used to experience before I did my own healing work too, was I would achieve, but that was never enough. Right.
That's good. Yep.
I always had to go to the next thing. There was always some higher achievement, some more achievement, because it was this bottomless void that would just,
wow.
doesn't matter how much I scooped in there. there was always more.
Hmm.
And there was always something better I can do. I can never just be okay with this was enough. Like,
Well, and I think what I've learned about myself is it wasn't just achievement and affirmation for achievement and affirmation's sake.
mm,
What I learned through therapy is that actually what I was trying to accomplish through this performance and through this validation was at the end of the day trying to convince myself of my own worth.
Hmm.
right.
And I
Yep.
think once I got to the place of being able to affirm myself and believe in
Mhm.
myself and say, Hector, you are enough. You have what it takes.
Mhm.
There was less pressure to have to do all those things outside.
Mm.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, well said. Absolutely. And I would say that's exactly what I felt too. Yeah, for sure. And that's that shame. It's the shame narrative, right?
Hmm.
Right.
Mhm.
Shame is that I'm not enough.
Right.
Right. That utter belief of ourself that somehow we're less than or not, we have no value or no worth. And then we find ways to fill that by workaholism,
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
to fill that. Whether because obviously it starts with that external kind of as children. It's always external first.
Yeah, man.
Right.
Yeah.
But then as we get older, it then becomes our own internal world of, well, I don't see it. I have to do this for me. And then, yeah, it's a vicious cycle, and it can be very isolating and can drive a lot of issues like anxiety,
Yep.
depression, a whole
Right.
bunch of stuff. And,
Right.
but then I think for your story though, is that you realized that and began to seek help. So I'm wondering, what was the impetus to change for you? What was the point of saying, you know what, I might need to seek out a therapist, and specifically a therapist, to get help on this? Like, what was if you remember, the turning point of, yep, I need to do that. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
for
starting
sure.
to become like my father or mother.
I think it was two things. I think the first thing is the most obvious, is just turmoil in my marriage. Like, me and my wife just not connecting, and like, thinking, okay, something needs to be reconciled, something needs to be tweaked. So we first engaged in marriage therapy, and so I know it's not solo therapy, but as a couple, some of those themes started to come up. I started to realize that. I think the second part was at the job that I was hired at right out of college and was there for almost 7 years. There was a point when we transitioned out and when we were leaving where it was like pulling teeth to get me to actually come to the place of putting in my resignation and leaving. And I had to figure out what that was. Like I had to come to terms, because there was so much in my heart and my soul that was just tangled, and I couldn't figure it out. But there was something there that was keeping me from just taking the step and transitioning from that job. And it was through that, realizing, okay, there's something a lot deeper here. This is much
Mm.
deeper than just a job. Like, why
Yeah.
am I having so much trouble
Mm.
transitioning out of there? So it was through that forced me to take a deeper look into my own heart, to figure out, what the deal is, what's happening, what's going on.
And do you think that was like an identity thing? Like,
Oh,
kind of,
100%. Yeah.
okay.
It was 100%.
Yeah.
I found a lot of my validation in that job. It was much deeper than just the job. It was Hector as the quote unquote, fill in the blank, whatever it was.
Mm. Yeah. So yeah, Hector, that idea of that identity, I think a lot of men, and myself included, would relate to that. Is a lot of men, we can tend to tie our identity in our work, in our performance, in our achievement,
Yeah.
and when that gets taken away, that can, for whatever reason, whether we lose it or something happens, it can really shake us to our core of, okay, who are we now without that? It's like this void.
Right.
Yeah.
And so within your your treatment, your healing within therapy, I'm wondering, for your identity, how did that shift for you? Like you said, you begin to affirm yourself. You said, I begin to see that I was enough. So what was that shift point for you? And does that still come up for you from time to time?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it always still comes up. I definitely would say that it's been a journey, like a progression, But there was one critical point where I think maybe more of the lights came on, and there's still more lights that need to be switched. But I remember one moment where the lights really clearly came on, and it was at the beginning of the pandemic, where, everything kind of was put on hold. And there were things that I was doing as a source for my affirmation and validation that had to stop because of the pandemic. And so I was forced to face the idea of, I don't have this stuff to generate my affirmations
Wow.
anymore. So in therapy, I knew there was something off. I said to my therapist, listen, like, what's happening? Like, tell me what's happening to me, because I'm trying to figure this out. And he told me, really chill guy, has a really soft spoken voice like you, Travis. He said, well, it sounds like, Hector. And he just broke it down for me. He said, it sounds like you don't believe in yourself and you're trying to generate affirmations to make you feel like you're good enough. And I was like, oh shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this, but I was like, wow, like the lights just went on. Yeah. And I think that's been the biggest turnaround. Now it's more easily identifiable, like when it does happen. Not that it doesn't, so I won't say it doesn't happen, but I can now identify what that is when it happens. So things like an identity statement is something that we've crafted together that I will recite to myself every morning. A purpose statement is something that I recite to myself every morning, and that I actually had to recraft, because before it had a lot to do with, specific things that were tied to my job. Now it's a lot more broadened. I help remind myself of who I am and what my identity is, to kind of keep that perspective.
Well, yeah, I know, powerful. That the pandemic forced that. Even, and it's funny. It says your therapist that it sounds like, because I say that all the time. It sounds like. It's a very therapist-y thing to say. So I'm caught red-handed. So yeah, it sounds like you did a lot of work, and often what I find working with men, and even my own journey, what I found is we think we've done a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then something else comes along and like rips that out. And you're like, oh, I thought I did work with this. Yeah. And it forces you to see like a deeper level. Like you said, the pandemic forced you to stop on some of those things that you were still getting achievement validation from, and you thought you did work, and you did do work. It's not that you didn't. It's like, yeah, you did. But this was like a whole other like forced stripping away of, and like, that's what I'm hearing is like, it just took, it's like the onion analogy, right? You just went, real
stripped
super
it back
core.
quicker. Yeah. And you know what else it was too, Travis and Markay, you'd probably, want to chime in here too, is right before everything went on pure restrictions for the pandemic, Kobe died. And that was another real big thing for me. It was before everything was stripped away, but the death of Kobe kind of had me primed and set up to really not just contemplate the loss of my identity, but give a new thing of what it needed to be. And that was being a girl dad, which is a big reason why we started Her Best Dad Ever. Was even the best basketball, arguably the best basketball player in the world, didn't find his identity in being an NBA player. He found his identity in being a good father. A bigger part of his identity was being a good father. Yeah. And so that was convicting to me as well.
And do you relate to that too, Markay? Similar?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, everything he said was spot on. So I agree with that totally.
Yeah, I mean, that was a shocking, and I don't follow basketball a lot, but I knew Kobe, obviously. My dad's a big Lakers fan, and I remember that day too, just shock of just like, oh my gosh, and just the whole story of what happened. It hits you different when you have kids and you hear these stories. It's just like you start to think of your own kids.
Right.
Since we're talking about Kobe Bryant and kind of the influence he had on you both as fathers and as dads, and you both mentioned you both went to seek therapy, and I'm wondering within the African American community, for both of you, like mental health, and I think this is true even in the community I grew up in, that when I was younger, we didn't talk about mental health. Like it wasn't a thing. Like my dad never talked about it. And it became more later on that it was encouraged me to go, but it wasn't something that we talked about. Like mental health wasn't a thing. We didn't talk about emotions even really too. But I'm wondering specifically within the African American community with mental health, seeking mental health treatment, was that something that was within your families? Was that a normal thing? Was that an encouraged thing? Was that this is what we do? Or was it not? Was it something that we didn't talk about? Was there a lot of fear around it about seeking out? And was it something that was, hey, we don't do this as taboo? Can you speak to that a bit?
You can go ahead, Markay.
Yeah. And I I think I want to choose my words really carefully with this, because I don't want to speak for the whole African American community as a whole, like I could just tell
so from my experience,
from my personal experience, and like within my family, it definitely was, how can I put it? Yeah, there was a stigma there. It was a challenge, because the narrative is, if you're going to therapy, you must be crazy. Something must be wrong. Like, why go to therapy where you could just talk to me, and I'm referring to a mom or an auntie or uncle, why do you need to go on somebody's couch and tell them all your problems? We don't do that, So it definitely was that narrative within my family. Once my mom and family heard that I ceased for counseling, yeah, it just opened up things where I was like, wow, like this is a problem within certain families, and whether it's us as African Americans or just certain families, that there is a narrative there that we see it as we only go if that person is literally insane or crazy or
Yeah, right.
And Hector, what about your experience with mental health within your family culture, and then also maybe the African American culture at large? Like it's a little bit of both, because you guys have
Yeah.
both experiences, like your own unit and then the larger unit.
For sure, yeah. I think for me, I didn't grow up in a traditional African American home. My mom is mixed, half white and half black. My father is Latino, which makes it interesting. I mean, we could have another whole podcast about me and my ethnicity, because that's every my wife and I have traveled a lot. Every country we go to, they try to claim me, but I'm basically a mutt. But anyway, like I find myself now though as in a lot of circles that I'm in, viewed as a black man, and so I identify as a black man in a lot of spaces. Specifically, we could have another whole conversation about the complexities and the nuances of
Yeah.
therapy in the Black community, because that even goes into fatherlessness, and even
Mm-hmm.
that's another whole deep dive of the system and what is up against the
Right.
Black community. So we could have another whole conversation about that, but specifically
Mm.
about therapy in my family, which wasn't a Black household. Culturally, we were more of a white household. It was still taboo or not seen as a positive thing for therapy, similar to what Markay was saying. It's like, hey, that's kind of reserved for people who are really going crazy. And I think added on top of that, and I think Markay would relate with this too, because we were in the church, we practiced Christianity in our household. I think an added layer of quote unquote God kind of played a role in it too. It's like stuff could be prayed away. You didn't need to go and have counseling or have therapy. The Holy Spirit, or whatever you want to call it, God can help you with that, which looking back now is crazy. So I think there was a taboo there, even though it wasn't explicitly communicated. But I found early on in my journey that it was needed. It's important, just to have somebody be present as you process, and they help you process.
Right.
For all the listeners that are listening, and I know we're big proponents of therapy on HerBestDadEver. It's very helpful. Everybody's got tangled stuff inside of them, and to have someone help you untangle that and process that, it's important. Recently, I had a good conversation with my mom, and she asked me how I was doing, and I was excited to tell her about therapy, that I was in therapy. And I was really just comforted by her response. She asked, "Oh wow," she said, "So what are you learning? How's it going?" And
Yeah.
I could tell she really wanted to know, and it kind of gave me an opportunity to share all the ways she had messed me up. No, I'm just playing. The things that I was learning, and we were able to have a good dialogue even from there. And I feel
good,
it
Hector.
helped. Therapy for me has helped even my mom and I's relationship kind of go deeper.
Wow, well said. And
That's good.
wow. And to close up this little short section for what we're talking about is, from your mental health experience and seeking out a therapist, what is like your one big takeaway from that experience? What would you want to give as like, hey, this is what I found and why I think it's helpful, specifically for men, if they need help, to ask for it?
Yeah, the first thing to come to mind is, for me, is just a an intentional safe place to just be. I feel like for us dads, and more so in the African American community, we don't have that. We don't have a safe place to just fall apart. Like, to me, that's healthy to have that place of safety where I can just, like, all my anxiety, all my fears, all my doubts, everything, just let it be and just let it go and just show up how I am. Yeah, I feel like that was therapy for me, and I want that for everybody because it's needed,
Wow.
especially in today's society.
That's good,
Wow.
Markay.
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
yeah,
Wow.
For me, it would be knowing that you are enough. Similar to what Markay just said, after it's all fallen down and you've let yourself kind of be vulnerable, knowing that you in that state, you're enough. You're enough. And you don't need outside sources for affirmation or validation, but you, where you are, you're enough. And from there, you can continue to put the pieces back together and grow.
It's good.
Wow,
It's good.
Hector and Markay, those are powerful experiences, and yeah, both those hit me too. Of like, yeah, you're enough, and to be able to be raw and let everything fall apart, and know you're safe, right? Like you're safe to do it, and accepted in that space, especially as men. Powerful. So, and I can totally relate to both those, and I encourage any guys thinking about it, or on the fence to ask, to seek out help. And it could be very terrifying for the first ask, and a big risk. Takes a lot of courage, and that's where we're going to go next. But I encourage all men, just from these two experiences, to reach out, man. If you're going through something and your hesitation, reach out to someone, whether it's even someone just to encourage you, a close friend that you trust, that you feel safe with. I mean, start there. If you want to start with a therapist, you don't have to go to see a therapist,
right?
But start with talking to someone, right? Exactly. I mean, just anyone. And then if you feel like you need more, then there are therapists out there.
It's good.
I mean, well said, guys. Well said. Hector and Markay, I think a great direction to go now for this part of the show. We kind of brushed upon this earlier, and we know that both of you are girl dads, and you have strong passions and care about raising girls, being her best dad ever, to quote your name of your show. And it's such a well-titled podcast show, and really trying to garner wisdom and experience from other men that are a little farther down the path, raising girl dads. And again, really trying to take all that knowledge and just say, how do we take all this gold and use it and distill it into something we can give to our daughters? And I think what would be a very interesting, real conversation within that, more specifically, would be, as African-American men, as multi-ethnic men, what is your experience in our current world's context, raising not only kids, but specifically also raising daughters within that spectrum?
Yeah, for sure.
It's a great question.
You want to go first, Markay? You want me to jump in?
Yeah, I'll go first. It's beautiful, but it's also a challenge, raising Black daughters in today's society. I think I mentioned on our podcast, my daughter, she's a big fan of like Disney Plus, where she's seeing all of these different Disney princesses, and she loves it, but she's also trying to, I guess, reconcile or not even reconcile, but she sees the difference between that versus her, and the idea of, oh, daddy, like, I want my hair straight, or daddy, like, why is my skin color this way? Or she's defining beauty based off of what she sees there versus what is reality, and we stay in a city where it's predominantly white. So a lot of her friends at school, have the same kind of texture of hair that she sees on the Disney movies. So therefore, when mom does her hair, she wants her hair straight. She doesn't see the value in her having coarse hair. Conversations like that, I feel like we have to be intentional about. It's a daily pursuit of conversation that I have to have with her that I didn't foresee coming. And not just that, but just the fact that their kids can be cruel. I will say that. And just a part of my journey is the conversation about just her skin tone, and the fact that her skin tone is different. And, she's in the second grade, and there's some kids that have said some gnarly things. That's been very hurtful, and so me trying to be as present as I can be, instilling in her like value. But I think that's a cultural difference between both white and black. Because I don't know if and Travis, you can speak to this, but I don't know if you guys have to have those conversations that we have to have with our daughters, just so they can walk into the world in today's society. Like, feel like we have to put on another set of armor onto them, just so they can feel that they can show up. And that's something that I'm just still navigating, still not all the way there yet. Don't have all the language too, but as I'm continuing this journey, like my daughter's 7 years old, that's something me and Hector talk about a lot, about what it means to raise Black daughters in today's society. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I think for me, and for Jessica, my wife, like Markay said, just intentionality, I think, is huge. For us, we tried, one of the things we really tried to be intentional with is, where we live. Markay mentioned kind of where we live. We live in the same area, and yes, it still is predominantly white, but it's more diverse than a lot of other places are. And there was another place, I won't shout it out, just I don't want to disrespect anybody who may be from that area, but we lived in another city for a long time, and it was not as diverse, and whatever diversity there was, the city was actually very segregated, and the community we were a part of was very white. And not that that's a bad thing in and of itself, but when you are planning to raise children, something that we value is representation, and being in a place where our daughters can see people like themselves, can hear stories from people that have their same skin tone, to hear the laughs of somebody with the same hair texture, and ultimately the feeling of not feeling othered. My wife and I also have felt that experience, the experience of of being othered, being the other person, not connected to this, and we didn't want that for our daughters. So the way we've handled it, yes, like what Markay said, is trying to put the armor on them as they go out into a predominantly white world, but also trying to create a world where they can still see people that look like them and experience like them. We want to get those people out there. One of those examples is, there's a lady in the community that we live who started a dance class. She's a Black woman, 2 Black daughters, and naturally her community, other Black mothers. And so there's this, dance class that they have that's predominantly, with all little Black girls. And there's a portion of the dance class that, yes, they teach ballet, but they also teach traditional African dance. And, just seeing those girls together, kind of having that community and camaraderie, and seeing, the sameness there and the community there, I think is really special.
Yeah.
The notion of you said that second set of armor. So what's the first set?
I mean, I don't want to answer for you, Markay, but I resonated with what Markay said, and I feel like the first set of armor is the very basic things of humanity. Just in general, there might be unkind things that people say to you. In general, there might be somebody who's having a bad day, and we need to treat all people with respect. In general, we need to not talk to strangers. In general, we need to be respectful. But I think as African American families, as multi-ethnic families, there is that added layer of circumstance, which requires a added layer of armor, so to speak.
Thanks for that clarification. No, that makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, Markay?
Yeah, you said it great.
Yeah. And I relate to that first set for sure. I mean, I think, like you said, I think it's just that first set as a parent of trying to protect our kids from those things, and just also teaching them about understanding, but also, healthy boundaries, and still, when someone says something hurtful or wrong or evil, it's still okay to say no to those things, but then giving them that kind of that armor at home, saying, but here's what we can do. And so I resonate with that. And you asked me a question earlier, Markay, is that, I've had this experience yet. And I actually, because my kids aren't in school yet, it's a definitely more, my kids have had a more, I don't want to say sheltered is the right word, but more innocent experience so far, because they haven't been in a school setting. And gosh, I mean, I remember being in elementary school, and, God, kids can be, kids were nasty. I mean, kids are brutal, man. Some kids are just nasty. And I was a chameleon kid. So I tried to be friends with all the groups, but there was numerous times I was, picked on and, pushed against the locker by bigger kids. That happened when I was younger, and, nicknames and of course, I want to be very clear. My experience as a white kid was definitely not anything of, was not that, but I still had my experience. If I remember being picked on, and kids just could be nasty. And then you add that other layer, I'm the other.
Right.
Yeah.
On top of just being normally picked on. It's like another, and I can't relate to that experience, but I can imagine just the more of that feeling, that weight would just be just a bit more heaviness.
For sure.
And again, my kids haven't had that because they're at home. My wife's stay at home full-time mom, which is a full-time gig, to say the least, more than full-time gig.
Yeah.
And she has play dates with kids, but the good news is we've been intentional about this. I mean, one thing is that her family's Argentinian. So my wife's family's from my wife's dad's Argentine, like full blown Argentinian, so we got that. So we have that kind of Latin inside, and
nice.
So her brother, is married to, they're kind of a multiracial, like she's Colombian, and so their cousins do have more kind of Latin skin tone.
Sure.
Okay.
My kids, unfortunately, are not. I don't want to say unfortunately because I don't want to be, negating their skin tone either. But they look more Swedish, like Russian Swedish, because for whatever reason, that's the genetics that just popped through.
Right.
Genetics are an
interesting thing for sure.
I don't know why, but if you look at our kids, they do not look like anything like their cousins.
Yeah, right.
But they have Latin in them, but just for whatever reason, my genetics, the Swedish and the Russian on my mom's side, for whatever reason, just powered its way through.
Genetics really are an interesting thing. I mean, even for our family with my 4 girls, they all come from the same mom, dad, but even within our family, there is differences, different curl patterns in each of my daughter's hairs, even different skin tones, in each of my daughter's lives. So that's even an added layer I know I'm dealing with, and I know Markay's dealing with too, is just even the comparison within our own household, and so we're trying very hard to affirm, even within our own household. No, Sarai, Eden's hair has this curl pattern, and it's special, just like your curl pattern is special. Also trying to protect our daughters from the outside pressures, even coming into our own households. Being intentional, even there to that extent.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Like even within your own family, seeing the differences. And you're right, because genetics, same parents, you have very different looking children.
Yeah, man.
And we'll see what our third looks like. Who knows? Maybe our third will get all the Latin Argentinian. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. I mean, it could happen. So, but one thing we've been intentional about is being aware of, and I was raised this way, in fact, I remember when I was younger, I was like the one white kid in a kind of Catholic school in downtown Pasadena.
Okay.
For a couple of years.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my earliest memories of schooling, because it was like second and third grade. So like, I don't really remember much before second grade.
Sure. Yeah.
Memory wise, like, what school was like, I have no idea. Couldn't tell you. But I remember that. And, I was definitely if I look at my class photos, it's like, there's Travis. You could tell I pop, I pop out, I pop. And to me, it was like, I just want friends, and I just wanted to play on the playground with. I just wanted nice friends, because there's some neat, mean kids that would pick on me from time to time. These twins that were just not nice. But for me, it was just trying to just be just friends. And then I remember when I moved, then I was at a more predominantly white school, and there was some a little multi-ethnic, but it was predominantly more white.
Sure.
And that was most of my kind of like junior high school.
Yeah.
Experience. But I did have that younger experience, and I remember that just like, okay, thinking back now, at the time I didn't understand, I wasn't thinking this way because I didn't need to, but looking back now, like, okay, that was a unique experience for me, I guess, in that sense of being in a different cultural mix-up from what I was predominantly in, being the more odd man out. I'm like, okay, and again, not that is anything the same, but okay, I was the one kid that looked different. And I remember I was trying to, and I think kids do this naturally, is I remember I was trying to fit in. So I would often, thinking back now, like I would start to talk like them, just because that was what was, I guess, school culture, right? Sure. Of that class was like, what's my class culture? Like that I'm trying to fit into, which is part of development, right? Kids try to find their peer group and try to fit in, and where am I in this? And they start to mimic. So I remember mimicking, gosh, I hope I wasn't doing anything wrong, but trying to mimic even what they were saying and how they were talking with some of my friends, because that was the thing. That was the
Yeah.
cool thing. So I was
So
just
I'm trying
trying
to get you
to,
right. At this school, it was primarily Latinx.
I think predominantly Latinx was the majority. And then it was like, that's probably 50%.
Yeah.
And then you'd have Asian American, some African American, and then I was the minority. So I don't know. It's probably 50%, maybe like 20 and 10.
Yeah, for sure.
Something like that.
So I think that's a good example too, because for you're asking kind of the experience of being a minority family, ethnic minority family, and I think that's kind of a cool thing that you touched on too, or not a cool thing, but an important thing to touch on too, is that in that context, where there is a majority culture person who may experience instances where they do feel like they're the oddball out or the one person out. I think the reality of of us as ethnic minority families is that there will definitely be those times, in specific contexts, but in general, I mean, we're preparing our daughters to go out into a predominantly white world, specifically in America, predominantly white nation. And hey, this is our best shot of helping you to navigate those waters as a Black woman in America. We want to give them a fighting chance to stand out and know their value and know that they can contribute to society. And that's why representation so important, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum. The fact that we have an African American and Pacific Islander woman as vice president was a huge thing, for our daughters to even see that, which is why any chance we get, try to celebrate for our daughters, for them to see, hey, oh man, there's somebody that looks like us. We can do this. We can strive for things that maybe generations in the past couldn't see as examples.
Yeah. And I really resonate with what Travis said about just the idea of like changing even your voice so you can fit in. I think that's a huge part of something that the Black community carries too, is just as we're preparing our daughters to, and I'm preparing our daughters to go out into the world, even as Black men, fathers going into the world, we have to change the tone of our voice, the sound
code
more.
Switching.
Code switching. That's a huge thing in today's society. Just to appear more safe, to the other, like I'm not a predator. I'm not the enemy, and that's something that we have to navigate. I remember back when and I haven't had this conversation yet with my daughters, and I know I'm going to have to one day, but just even the idea of like talking to your kids about how to handle the police, is a huge thing that we carry, a huge weight as parents that we carry. My mom had to do it to me because there's just a difference of when we get pulled over versus versus a white man that gets pulled over, and that's just fact, and it's sad. Statistically. Thank you, Hector. But it's just like those kind of weights that we carry just to prepare our families to go into the world is something that just it's really disheartening, man, and it's very traumatizing because I know we've been talking about mental health and all of the things, and it affects mental health. Like seeing people, I know the conversation didn't go here, but I'm sorry if I'm going here. Seeing people actually get murdered is a huge. I mean, I can't even articulate what that does psychologically to us Black men that deal with that. I've been pulled over. I've been, guns to my head and everything. And, it's just, man, I get low key emotional even talking about it. Cause it's just, I've had to sit in therapy and talk through all of that stuff, and wrestle with all of those things, man. And, but it's something that we have to have conversations about to just prepare. We talked about the added armor to put on, because you have to be strong enough to deal with that type of stuff on a daily basis.
W.E.B. Du Bois calls it the dual consciousness, and the idea of viewing yourself just as a person, but then the dual consciousness viewing also yourself from a third perspective, from majority culture, and which is how we code switch so easily. And I want to be sensitive to it too, understanding that skin tone plays such a huge part in it, and not for a second, putting myself, in the same area. Hopefully, I don't know if this is okay ending on the episode, but one of my daughters is Alexiing with Alexa, trying to message B and say, "Daddy." But
it's totally fine. By the way, he has it, but my youngest son ends up joining the podcast at one point because it's middle of a conversation. He's like, "I'm up." It's
and this is kind of like a
5:45.
dad podcast. It would be horrible to be like, "Go to bed. We can't."
You can't be on here. Don't talk. I don't have children. They don't do anything. I don't have to work. They're perfect. No, it's like it's real. It's real. It's like, hey, that's what kids do. And wait, and she's up early.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think she's fine. But anyway, just to finish my thought too, like kind of also calling out too and recognizing that each culture is different. And recognizing that even for me, being a lighter complexion, having different experiences and not experiencing the same things that some of my darker skin tone brothers and sisters have experienced, knowing that there'll be a different experience for my daughters who have darker skin tone than I do. And just recognizing that and owning that and sitting with it and, processing it with our daughters.
Yeah. Sorry, Travis, we went all the way in.
No. No, this is great. I mean, and part of this is, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had for all, right? And there's so many questions I want to ask. I think one I didn't think of, and maybe we could talk a little bit about that, is that kind of, even within your family, the genetics, right? That, and you mentioned it too, with just darker skin versus, you're comparing yourself, Hector, like, hey, even the skin tone does matter as far as the shade. You're saying darker you go, like it's a different experience.
There's a level of privilege that comes with every shade lighter of skin that you have, and I'm aware of that because I'm lighter. There's, in America, there is more privilege that comes with that.
Yeah,
and so with that, within your family, you mentioned that even your daughters, which is genetics, right? It's just not like you can control that. There's some different shades, and you've even noticed there. You even said they're darker than you are, and there's more worry that, hey, I'm aware that I have a little lighter skin, therefore maybe my experience has been different. And so my daughters, though. So I'm wondering what is that like for you? Like, how do you have the conversation? Like, you even mentioned, like, hey, my daughter's hair swirl pattern, curl patterns this way. It's both beautiful and unique. It's just different. Yeah. Right? You were even kind of alluding. So can you speak more to that experience within even your family?
Yeah, I think it's cool. We still have so far to go, but we have come a long way. And I'm really kind of encouraged that today, on our bookshelf, we have many kids' books, that are specifically addressing that issue. I don't want to butcher the titles right now because I know I'm going to forget them all, but books that, specifically talk about different hair patterns, a whole book just dedicated to affirming different hair patterns, and whole books, kids books, for little Black girls, affirming different shades of skin and comparing them and talking about them in the context of beautiful imagery rather than negative imagery that they might see in the media. So that's what I would say. Aside from just intentionally as parents affirming their worth and affirming who they are and their uniqueness that they have, we also have resources like kids' books that do that, alongside us.
And what about you, Markay? Is that an experience you've had even within your family, like Hector's?
Yeah, not yet, actually. Okay. I haven't, Hector has way more kids than I do, so he has to.
Yes, he does, right? way more kids. That was a loaded way. So what do you mean behind the way more? Tell me more.
We have these date nights that we switch on and off. That there's every Friday, Markay and I and our families, we babysit for us. And Markay and Carmen definitely have the short end of the stick. But, on Friday nights that we watch, they bring their 2 kids over, and on the Fridays that we go out, we bring all 4 of our kids.
Man, and it's great too. We love it. We have so much fun. That was the weight behind the way more.
It's like, oh man, this is intense. That's funny.
Because
Thank
one
you
thing I
for
love
that.
about Hector's kids is like they all have like big personalities, and it's amazing. Like like they're 3 years old, but they are like really like 10 in a 3-year-old body.
Right.
So that sounds like way more work.
No, but it's great though.
Right.
I love it. The conversations we have is amazing. So, but yeah, to that point, though, I haven't navigated that yet, so I can't really speak to that.
Sure.
But I know for sure that's a real thing that
Okay.
Hector's talking about. So yeah.
Well, it's almost, and I can't, you tell me, I guess, Hector, with that, how I would think could be another I'm trying to think of myself in that situation, and this may not be how you feel, but feeling like, okay, I'm dealing with this from the culture I'm in and dealing with just that layer. And now, gosh, now it's happening in my family. Almost like, why? Like, why? Like, why are they at each other? Like when they're supposed to be family? I mean, is that, I don't know if that's
it's a historical thing. I mean, if you look back to slavery in the Black community, what historians would call the house slaves, people who maybe were mixed with the slave owner. Maybe it was a scenario where the slave owner raped one of the slave women, and now you have people with lighter complexions. They were the ones that, in general, would be allowed into the plantation, into the home. Would be the ones with more privilege, gained more access, and that, just as a result, would create this tension between the darker complexion people out on the field or out, on the plantation, with these people who had the privilege inside the house. So, it's a historical thing, just this tension, even within the Black culture, of comparison, of level of privilege. And me and Jessica, when we talked before we had kids, I don't think I've ever even shared this with you, Markay, but like before we started having kids, when we found out we were having twins, we were terrified at the possibility of having two girls. We were hoping for a boy and a girl, and the second option would be two boys. But the thought of having two girls was scary to us because we knew that the comparison game was a potential. And we had two girls, for twins, and after that we had two more girls. So it's kind of funny, but realizing that even within the household, knowing the history of it, it's a very, very real thing. So we're trying to actively, with the things I talked about before, trying to counter that for sure.
What do you think the biggest or one of the big fears as men with raising daughters? What's the fear within that? And then what's the fear within the larger culture of within the U.S. here currently?
Well, I could just speak to the fear that I carry daily in this season is just the idea of that my daughter won't be accepted, and them not being accepted for who they are, how they're wired, their giftedness, their uniqueness. So them going out into the world, experiencing the world, how I experienced it, me being an African-American Black father in this world, they having the same skin color as me. It takes me back to, 7-year-old Markay and things I had to navigate, and being their father and being their protector. That's the thing that I'm just like most fearful of, because I just know I'm not going to be able to protect them from everything. And that's something that just grieves me and something that hurts my heart. Because they're going to walk into this world and experience some things that they're going to have to experience.
And how do you cope with that?
I was going to say something funny, but I'm not going to say it.
You can't. You're already there now. I mean, might as well. And then
I know, dang, I messed it up. I should have just kept it serious. I'm not. Yeah, me and Hector have this inside joke. We have our little whiskey every once in a while and just kind of
that's how we cope.
That's how we cope and decompress.
That's good. Don't worry, disclaimer is going to go right here.
Right. Please put that there.
It's a nice spot for it. It's just going to go right across the screen.
Yeah.
As our friend Chase usually says, "Don't worry, we're just being serious." No,
that's good.
No, we're kidding.
Yeah.
But also having a brother like Hector in my life, man, is a way I cope, and just to have somebody in community with me in the same season of life with me, just to carry the weight with, like
Yeah.
I'm like me acknowledging I'm not carrying this by myself. Like whenever I feel those pressures and those worries and anxieties and fears, I can call him, which I do all the time, and allow him to speak life into me and to encourage me and to just carry it, So I think more seriously, that has been a huge blessing to me more than anything else.
Talk about Markay too, though. You're really big on hobbies and self-care. I mean, how do you? I mean, I know that those are ways that you cope as well, right?
Yeah. So definitely, like I pride myself in self-care and taking care of myself, just because there was a father that told me the best thing that a father can do is present a healthier version of themselves. That's the best thing you can do for your family, is to present a healthier version of yourself. So I'm always posturing myself to rest, to breathe, whether it's meditating, whether it's flying kites on the beach. That's something I do, Travis. I have like all the different types of kites.
Really? So you're like a kite aficionado.
Oh yeah, man. Sports kites, all the things, like I love kites. I'm a vinyl guy. I collect vinyl, and that's something that I love, just sitting and listen to music with my my little cup of whiskey, not too much, Travis. Also RC cars. I talked to Hector about my RC cars I've just got into like within the last six months. So I go down to the Rose Bowl.
That's a money pit, right? No.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
In a good way.
But no, those are some of the ways I decompress and just kind of breathe. And man.
Yeah. So those are like really healthy distractions, healthy outlets. In those spaces when you are doing some of those activities, is that also where you think and process that stuff? Or is it more of I'm just focusing on this and taking a break, and then I process some of the stuff? Like I reach out to my buddy Hector and we talk, and like that relational, coping of like, hey, we talk and get real with each other and support each other.
Right.
Or in those spaces, are you also kind of like mulling stuff over and addressing those things?
Sure. It's more so for me a break, because I've learned for me, I need because I carry so much pressure and I put a lot of pressure on myself to show up for people well. So I just need a second just to breathe and just to not think about anything. And just to be present in that moment with whatever I'm doing in that moment. So, that's what it is for me.
And what about you, Hector? A fear that you face as a dad now, raising daughters, African-American daughters. What is one of the bigger fears that you wrestle with?
I feared that, my daughters would lack opportunity. And that, knowing the gifting they have, knowing the strength they have, knowing all the potential they have, the thought of them not being given an opportunity because of whether it's an unconscious bias or a conscious bias, prejudice, or outright racism, that they would be denied an opportunity. That's that's a big fear of mine.
And how do you cope with that?
It's a good question. If I could, just so I could be organized, because I have a history of not coping well, I actually kind of put some things down. And if it's okay, can I just like read through some of the things real quick?
Oh, absolutely.
So I needed to first identify the ways I cope badly, and I've defined them in two different ways. Like there's a difference between restoration and relief. Coping negatively is the idea of relief, just seeking like, I don't want to do with this, versus I think an appropriate way to cope is kind of finding restoration, or the difference between thriving and surviving, trying to thrive rather than just survive. For me, kind of the negative ways for me, alcohol, negative streaming shows that are just kind of like mindless types of shows, something that I do. Sweets outside of meals, like eating sweets just to cope. Social media, TikTok especially is like a black hole for me, shopping online, and sometimes online games will just suck time. So recognizing those, but then replacing them with some healthy things. So to answer the question, it's a long way to get there. The positive ways I cope are music. Just being able to sit down at the piano and sing is really, really life-giving for me. Taking walks outside and just being outside in general Listening to audiobooks that are feeding me knowledge and wisdom and things like that. Meaningful podcasts, and I say meaningful podcasts because there's a lot of not life-giving podcasts out there that are just kind of waste of time. Listening to music, I forget, as a musician that, even just listening to music, like what Markay said, man, if you played the right song, it's like, oh man, it can just, align you right back up. Reading and actually gardening. I enjoy gardening in my backyard. So those are some of the ways I cope.
I appreciate that vulnerability and honesty, Hector, and with some of the ways in which maybe I cope not so well unhealthily and as a way of survival. And I think we all go into survival mode,
right?
And those things do serve a purpose, right? Even like binge watching Netflix, it's serving a purpose, right? It's the relief, and we're wired. Part of our wiring as humans, right, is to survive, and so we go into these defense mechanisms to survive. And in that short term, obviously certain things, yes, are very negative. Like in a short term, if I go shoot up heroin, is very different than in the short term I watch, the Great British Baking Show.
Sure.
Right. Which I love, by the way. And the new season just came out.
Nice.
If you like food, it's a great show, and they're so nice to each other. It's like it's so different than American shows, because American shows are just everyone's so mean to each other.
Yeah.
But everyone's like loving and hugging, and I don't know if you've seen it. It's a white thing, but it's
I got to check it out.
It's great. It's these cooking competitions. It's called Great British Baking, and they have their 9th season, and it's been running, and it's awesome. It's these home bakers that come anyway. But I'm digressing. But it is a great show. Anyway, all to say that those serve a purpose. They serve a purpose of survival, and survival is a needed thing. And so I want to give you some credit, Hector, for sharing those things, because some of those things, if taken in balance, aren't necessarily, you said, a negative. Right. You said these are negative ways, and they can be, right? If that's all you did, just distraction, just avoidance, just like taking a break, then those ways of survival often then will create negative outcomes, because then you're not addressing or dealing with whatever it is that those things are serving a purpose to take a break from.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. So I appreciate the list of hey, man, I relate to some of that list. Absolutely. Do I sometimes go and get some dark chocolate? What, just mindlessly? Yeah. Do I sometimes watch Netflix? Mindlessly? Yes.
And let me clarify. Let me clarify for the listeners too, because I'm really glad you called me out on that, because it's important, and it's not it's not a bad thing to watch a Netflix show or anything like that. I think, to clarify, for me, my personality, I'll give you an example. I started watching the show called The Wire again. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Mm-hmm. It's the third time I'm watching through it.
You're committed.
For me, there's a fine line. It's hard for me to watch one episode and create a boundary for myself to turn off, especially if I'm in an unhealthy place. And I don't know, maybe some of your listeners will resonate with this, but if I'm not at my best, those things that are neutral and not a bad thing, like what you said, British Baking Show, or Netflix, or whatever those things, those things that aren't in and of themselves bad things, for me, become bad things, because I have issues with boundaries sometimes, saying nope, that's the last show, turn it off. Right. For me, using those things as coping mechanisms turn into negative things.
And that's good. The awareness, right, of knowing yourself and knowing your own areas where you have kind of weaknesses, not negative weaknesses, but hey, I tend to not be so strong in these areas. And I know these are my slippery points where if I start to go down this path, I really need to be mindfully aware of where I'm at, because I can't easily go. And we all have those. We all have those kind of slippery slopes, no matter who you are, myself included, we all got slippery slopes. And so I love that, having that mindful awareness of, okay, yes, these things aren't inherently evil or negative, but I need to be aware, because of my personality, to be very mindful of this when I'm here, especially if I'm in a bad place. And I think that's the key, is what are you intending this to do? I guess what's the intention behind it?
Yeah.
Why are you going towards this, using whatever it is you're using? What's the motivation and the underlying subconscious intention as to why you're going towards this?
Yeah, that's good.
And I have to ask myself, even as a therapist, that question. because I could get in my automatic pilot kind of survival mode too. Just, like I could emotionally turn off, and I have, and it's a daily practice of, wait, okay, I have been a little stressed and maybe I watched too much Netflix this week, rather than, and not to beat myself up, but okay, I need to spend some time journaling or writing or processing or talking to my wife, talking to a buddy, because maybe I've been kind of veering a little bit too much on disconnection.
Yeah. Withdrawing
for what I'm tired, I'm tired and I'm stressed. And so because of that, my energy levels are lower. And so I kind of do the easier thing, right? Because it's less work to just put on a show than to sit there and process what's really going on for me, or talk with a friend and process. And so I found it's about balance. I don't know what you guys think about that, balance of using these kind of healthy distractions, being aware of what they do. And also knowing that sometimes you're not using them to distract, you're using them because there is entertainment. Like, hey, this is actually entertaining for me. It's not a distraction right now. It's like, I enjoy watching Great British Baking Show because I like the food. So right now it's not a distraction because I'm not in a bad place. Right. So it's the awareness of what place am I in when I go into this. Right. What do you guys think about that balance and being that aware? What do you guys think? Can you speak to that?
I think you're spot on. I mean, for me, I'm a little different just on the idea of like, we're also in a pandemic, where I found myself giving myself extra grace and allowing myself to have those spaces, just because I know, like, hey, what I'm doing right now is really hard, and I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to get by. At the time, I had a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old in homeschool at the same time, where we had to be a first grade teacher and a pre-K teacher.
Wow.
As well as doing 2 full-time jobs, with my wife and me. And so I actually leaned more into maybe some unhealthy patterns, just to like, hey, if I need some candy right now, I'm going to take it, just to, just because I'm trying to survive in this thing. Me and Hector have had those conversations. But I know I'm going to have therapy even after the pandemic.
But there's the difference. And there's 2 things there. One, what is your candy bar of choice? I'm just curious.
Hey, actually, I love Reese's in this season. Like it's become my new.
The Pieces or the Reese's Cups?
The Reese's Cups. Okay. But the trick is you got to put it in the freezer for like 10 minutes. Okay, right, Travis? It has to be cold. You cannot have room temperature. Right?
Yeah, room temperature Reese's are horrible.
Right?
You're like this is
it just man. So I might grab some today.
Weird. Yeah, that's so okay, I can relate to you. So I do the healthy version, which is actually not healthy, but in my mind I trick myself. So Trader Joe's sells a container that's like, I don't know.
The peanut butter cups.
Yes, they're dark chocolate.
Yes.
And because they're dark chocolate, I tell myself there's antioxidants. It's dark chocolate.
That's amazing.
So as he's coping with the peanut butter cups, he's like, no, these are healthy.
These are healthy. I tell myself, no, I'm getting my antioxidants for the day.
There you go.
I'm good.
I love that.
And it's balancing out. So no, those are my guilty pleasure. And I put them in the fridge because there's something about it, man. I learned that trick. I'm like, I never go back, because when they're in the just room temperature, it's just, it's melt. It doesn't like it. It melts too fast. It doesn't, the texture. So I guess Hector, we need to give Hector both and give it and say, put them in your fridge and we'll have a taste test. So I'm just curious. That's funny.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
But something else you said, which is spot on, is you also know, so yes, you do that. And and you have grace, like it, and it's good to have, be kind to yourself, and because we're often our worst critic, we often are our worst bully internally. We have that bully voice that kind of beats ourselves up more than we would to someone we love. Like if we talk to our daughters or our kids, if they had a similar experience, we often wouldn't be as critical with them as we are with ourselves. Yeah. And so it's often trying to find that kinder, supportive, loving voice for ourselves. Yeah. Right. But what you said was, I know that I'm going to therapy. I know that I talk to Hector and get real. So you already have the balance built in.
Oh, I didn't even see it that way. Wow. Right? Yeah.
It's already there. So you already know that, okay, I know I do this, but I also know that I talk to my therapist. I also know I talk to Hector about the real stuff. I also know that I do. So there's the balance. It's there. Yeah. Because you go and reflect back. You're reflecting back. Yeah, that was, maybe I had maybe too many Reese's, because I'm surviving. So the awareness is there, and you're like, okay, I'm working on being more mindful of it. Because I'm processing it. You're not just sitting with the Reese's and buckets and buckets of them. Maybe you are, but
no, I'm not. I'm not.
At your worst. It's just a Costco pallet full of Reese's.
Right.
It's like I got my fill for the year. It's just a shipping container of Reese's. And I think that's good to speak, because I think as men, and you even said this, Hector, is alcohol. I think that's a big way men cope. I mean, men statistically tend to cope with alcohol as a negative coping. I mean, there's ways to drink alcohol without it being super, negative, obviously. And but for some men and women, they can't have even one drink. They can't contain themselves. It becomes a very quick, slippery slope because of the effects. And I'm glad you spoke to that, because I think a lot of men listening can probably relate to that. It's like, oh yeah, I had just because I just wanted to check out, and there's no shame or guilt behind it.
For sure.
But it's more of an awareness of, well, okay, why am I pouring my second, third, fourth, fifth drink?
Yeah.
What is this? And building upon the awareness, not saying you're doing that, but just other guys listening, like, hey man, if you're doing that, that's all right, but let's build the awareness, and let's work on what are you really needing in that moment? Like, what's the need?
Yeah.
You're seeking comfort in this, and okay, what are you seeking comfort from? Yeah. And asking the harder questions.
I'm glad you spoke to that. Like, giving clarity to that. I think, for your listeners, I hope I didn't come across when I gave my list that like I had all my stuff together. That's what I strive for would have been my pain. But the reality is, much different. I'm in this trying to figure it out, So
I always had to tell people, yes, I'm a therapist. I have letters behind my name, but that doesn't mean I don't have the same struggles. Doesn't mean I could struggle with similar negative coping. It doesn't mean that I don't check out. I have all those things. All those things affect me.
Travis, what's a question I'm just curious, like, and I know you probably know the answer as a therapist. What are some ways to find those healthy coping mechanisms? Or, what are some maybe general coping mechanisms that, people should maybe embrace?
That's a great question. I think, and I take this from my old supervisor back in the day, kind of an acronym he gave me. He said PMS, so not premenstrual cycle. So it's not that. And I have to clarify this with people. And when I work with women too, I'm like, I say PMS, like, but not that, not what you're thinking. It's just an easy way to remember it. But it's
I will not forget that.
Person, mind, substance. So the way we're wired, and it's great, especially when you have kids, because it makes more sense. So when your kids get hurt, they're sad, they're upset. At least when they're younger, maybe when they get older, they might kind of close the door and I don't want to talk to you. But when they're younger, what's their initial reaction? What are they looking for?
They're looking for comfort.
From who? Were they
parents.
Did you teach your daughter to do that?
No.
No. I didn't teach my boys either. Right. I didn't teach them to come crying to me and want to be held, and I didn't teach them that. It's naturally built into our wiring that we seek out safe connection. And so that's the person. That's our primary way of navigating distressing situations, is to seek out comfort from another human being that we feel safe with. So the caveat, though, is depending upon how we're raised and depending upon how our parents responded to us, for better, for worse, is, how did they respond to us in general? Not saying the one-off, because no parent's perfect, but in general, how did they respond to us when we were in some type of emotional, mental distress? Were they responsive? Did they comfort us? Did they hold us? Did they soothe us? Or, for the majority of the time, like, again, majority, because parents aren't perfect. We have our moments when we might, but I'm talking majority of the time. Or did the majority of the time, did they negate our feelings? Did they get angry with our feelings? Were they even around? So we learn as children to adapt to our environment to survive when we're in distress. So we learn that we either learn that, hey, people are safe for the most part, that for the most part I can turn to people and feel validated and comforted and work through things, and that's our primary source. Or we learn that typically, people are either not there for us or not safe. And so we over rely on kind of an unhealthy independence.
Okay.
And then we start turning to other things to soothe. And we do that naturally anyway. We start to find other ways of kind of soothing by ourselves, but within the balance of also seeking out authentic relationship with our primary caregiver. And then eventually, as we get older, with friends or with a spouse, we learn that, I can do this. But a lot of us don't have the experience. That's the primary way, person. So if at the end of the day, what we're really wired for biologically is other people, other safe people. So that's the first most effective way of dealing, as far as a coping style, is within relationship with another human being, to be known, to be seen for who we are and accepted.
Yeah.
Right. Because we're all looking for acceptance just with us. Because often we fear, well, people know this about me, or if they knew this, I'd be rejected. They wouldn't want me. They wouldn't love me. Right. That shame comes in. So that's the first. And then the second two-way, mind, is kind of your own way of coping, like journaling, meditation, writing, processing, right? It's kind of engaging the problem, but by yourself.
Yeah.
So not distracting, but you're still engaging it, and whatever that might be. And there's so many ways to do that.
Sure.
And the third way is distraction. So when I say distraction, or substance, and when I say substance, the reason why he said and I say substance is not that necessarily substance is a negative, because there are good substances. It goes to how we use them and and the purpose they serve, because there are plenty of unhealthy substances that we use.
Right.
And what happens, so think of that as a tier. So PMS, so person, mind, substance. So often though, we have it like this, where our first go-to is a substance to cope. We rarely use our mind, and often we never turn to people. We tend to flip it, where we tend to distract, use substances to kind of disengage from the world. And there's various reasons as to why we do that. And often when people come to therapy, when they see me, that tends to be their primary way of coping, is through the use of some plethora of substances, some healthy, some unhealthy. But what they're trying to do is navigate their own emotional pain and distress. But they don't know how to talk to people. And often when I get to hear their story, there's reasons as to why they don't talk to people. And often part of their healing process is grieving and healing from the past, from their parents, from past hurts and wounds, and starting to then retrain them to say, we need to flip that and start to seek out healthy, because I am essentially that healthy, safe connection.
Yeah.
So sorry to spoil it for everybody, but that's the therapist trick, is that we are that safe person that for a lot of people, when they say, I don't talk to anybody about this, we are the first person that they feel safe enough to actually show themselves, so to speak.
Wow. Travis.
Wow.
Man.
That was huge.
You know what? You should start you should start a podcast for therapy for dads. Yo, that was amazing, bro. I'm so glad I asked that question. That was really good. Dang.
Okay. I'm glad it was a sufficient
Hector,
answer.
that was so good.
That was good. I was like, wait, where's he going with this?
Right.
So that's something, and that's something to think of. Yeah. So I don't know.
EMS. I'm never going to forget that. That's good.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. It's interesting when you think of it. You're like, yeah, you're right. You learn. And I learned that in my own therapy too, that, I did therapy before I became a therapist, and, my parents divorced, and I had to deal with my whole emotions behind it and my distractions and what I was doing, and said, I need to do something different, and started looking at my behavior and realizing why I do what I do, and started to seek out healthier connection and learn. And so
is a therapist, is it, as a therapist, would you say it's sufficient to kind of keep that therapist as that primary personal connection, or is a therapist always kind of trying to encourage their patient to go and find other interpersonal connections and relationships?
I just question, then I'll get my son, and then I'll ask a final question, because I hear him saying data. I think initially I am that person. And so it's kind of like a retraining. It's a healing process to then give them the confidence and knowing that people can be safe. You just have to find the right person. And so my goal is always to say, I am not sufficient, because at the end of the day, to rely on me solely is not enough.
Wow.
So you need to find those relationships in your community, within your family. And if it's not your blood family, that's a whole other topic conversation. There's plenty of people's blood family that is so toxic and so unhealthy that I'm like, we need to have boundaries with them, and probably not, if you keep going to the same person every single time for years and years and years, and you keep getting harmed by them over and over and over and over and over again, this whole notion that, blood is thicker than water, and then it's my family. I'm like, okay, if it was your friend, so take family out. If this person was your friend, would you still be in a relationship with them? And when those types of relationships are existent, 10 times out of 10, they're like, no, I would never be in a relationship with them. I'm like, okay, so
Wow.
just because they're your family doesn't mean that you need to keep going back to them, because they're harmful, toxic people. Wow. So we need to also have boundaries with them, and that's okay.
Wow.
And so we need to trade that in for healthy relationships, because those are people that are life-giving, and that becomes your new family. It's not biology, but the hope is that they are. So I would say I'm going to go get them, and then I'll finish. But
Cool.
anyway, bear back.
Cool.
Man, that's good. PMS.
Yeah, I'd say in the end, guys, it's we want relationship, and you guys are doing it. You guys, I mean, already you guys are. Think about that. You're not blood family, but you're finding authentic. You're dealing and seeking comfort in we call it. It's a healthy interdependence. So the term codependency. I don't like that term. I think a more accurate way to say it, this is my perspective, is an unhealthy dependence.
Got it.
Versus a healthy dependence, healthy interdependence. So in a good friendship, a good partnership, good marriage, good whatever, is a healthy interdependence. So it's like kids. So the thing about kids, the safer they feel with their primary caregiver.
Yeah.
Right? This is where attachment comes in. The safer a child feels, the freer they are to go explore the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they have this
because they know they're safe and they're secure. They know that, I feel safe. I have a home base. So I now can explore the world.
It's good.
Non-anxiously because I know. Yeah, light on. Non-anxious because I have been shown through repetition that my primary caregiver or whatever is there, is present, is consistent, is safe, is secure, and that enables me to actually be essentially independent.
Yeah.
But not overly independent because I still have this attachment, this healthy interdependence upon these people. So it's the balance of the two. It's when we get out of balance, that's when things start to go awry. And again, to speak to those people that I've worked tons with, is that it's often out of survival that we shut ourselves off. Because if things weren't safe to talk about as a kid, why in the heck would you share about it now?
Right.
Why would you?
Wow.
You've been trained to not share. You've learned that it's not safe, and your brain remembers this is danger. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's a bear in front of you or an angry parent who doesn't care about your feelings. Your brain's like, danger, shut off, don't, survive.
Yeah.
And so, and I think about that. You practice that over time, years and years of that. So why would you ever think of opening up to someone?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
You wouldn't.
Man.
Right?
Right.
Right.
And so
right.
I tell people that. I'm like, hey, the reality is you've practiced this out of survival for, if they come in to see me after, 30 or 40, I'm like, you've been doing this for 40 years.
Yeah.
So no wonder why it's so hard to try to talk to someone one time.
Yeah.
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 You have 40 years of experience of this as survival. And so, of course, it's going to be unfamiliar. Of course, it's going to be terrifying and scary and all those things because you've never done it.
Yeah.
So keep practicing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm here, so.
In this moment, when you walked away to get your son, Travis, I told Markay, just kind of what I was feeling, that in this moment, I feel really grateful. I feel really grateful for you, Travis, for kind of allowing us the safe space to be able to be accepted, and to be heard, and as dads, I appreciate that. But I especially appreciate Markay and, the friendship we've developed, and, him being nothing but accepting, what you're talking about. And as I'm hearing you talk about it, I'm feeling the weight of what you're describing. And I feel really lucky because I feel I have that, in Markay and, and of course some other people, but our show, Her Best Dad Ever, is kind of built on that foundation. And we want to extend an invitation, to all other girl dads too, to let them know that community is important, in essence, right, Markay? I mean, that's what we're wanting to communicate with our podcast is community. Dads can't do this alone.
Right.
You need community, which is what I know you're promoting too, Travis. So I feel really lucky to be able to, have you guys and guys like you in my life.
Oh man, that's
Beautiful, Hector.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I really, that's very kind words, Hector. And I appreciate you guys. I mean, to do this and to talk and create connections. And part of my heart has been with the show is to speaking. We were talking about kind of cultural differences in African American, Latinx, Asian American, whatever, white, Jewish, doesn't matter. Part of my big heart is to create a community of dads where we're getting ahead of the politicians.
Yeah.
Not waiting for them to fix our world.
Right.
Right. Because I'm tired of waiting for them.
Yeah.
What if we heal small communities out and make the change that way and heal of like, hey, we're all dads. That's what unites us. And we have different experiences. How do we learn from each other?
Yeah.
How do we hear each other?
Yeah.
How do we understand each other's experiences and honor that and help each other and support each other in these different places and spaces. And that's part of why I do what I do, is to wanting to help that as well. And maybe, if I can bridge some gaps across cultures and age, all those things.
Yep.
So
I love it.
That's a big thing. So I appreciate you both. And yeah, I hear kids in the background. So stop it, Dada. What? Excuse me. Can you say hi, by the way? Can you say hi?
Hi.
Hi.
Can you say morning?
So cute.
Thanks, Travis. This was great.
Yeah. Blessings to you guys. And I really do want another episode of us, because there's some other questions I didn't get to ask that I really wanted to ask. And just, this was so rich and it's so fun. Oh, don't touch that. No. That'll change everything on the audio. Buttons. He's all electronic. So blessings to you guys and your families, and, all the work you guys are doing. And as again,
Thanks, Travis.
guys that are listening, if you are a girl dad and want another great show, please go to HerBestDadEver, and I'm going to link your show and everything in the pod notes and everything, so people could find you guys. And it's, again, I am not a girl dad. I'm going to reiterate this again. I've listened to the show numerous times, and I learned from it, just to hear these experiences of dad. Like, it's great. Like, there's so much wisdom and everything. So,
thank you.
You guys are awesome. Thank you, Hector and Markay, for everything you do. And we'll talk soon.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks
man.
Travis.
Peace.
Bye, guys.